Hello, Claire. I'm finally making a video response to your video like I promised. For those of you who aren't aware of her, LunariaClair is fairly new to YouTube. She's only been making videos for about a month, but she's already got a lot of fans, and I am one of them. She's a big movie fan, like many of us, and she made a video about a week ago in which she detailed a list of her 5 favorite movie characters. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. I gotta try that as well. And it took me a long time to figure out how to do that. Just for the record, Claire's favorites are Willy Wonka, played by Gene Wilder, Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss in Jaws, Freddy Krueger, played by Robert Englund, Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind, and Marty McFly, played by Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. So when I sat down, well, I didn't actually sit down, when I started to think about how am I going to do this, out of all the movies that I've seen, all these stories, these characters, how would I possibly pick 5 favorites of mine? I didn't really know what to do except to start with the ones that I liked when I was a kid, and actually was able to come up with 5 characters fairly quickly. To my surprise, I'm like, well, that's obvious. Of course those 5, you know, they have to be. But then I went, wait a second, these are all male characters, no females. And I really ought to throw, you know, some females in there, but I'm not really sure exactly, you know, I mean, because was it going to be 3 male, 2 female, and 2 female, or something like that? I didn't know. So I said, you know what, I'll do 5 male characters and 5 female characters. So that should be too hard. So I started making a list of female characters, and I came up with like 19 of them. I'm like, great, now what I'm going to do, I have to narrow it down somehow. So I narrowed it down to about 6, and I looked at those 6 right there and like, gosh, those 6, they're just like the ultimate, and I can't get rid of one of them. It came down to like 2. I'm like, well, I could get rid of this one, or maybe that one, but I couldn't get rid of either of them, so I had 6 female characters. Now, I thought to myself at that point, okay, well, if I have 6 female characters, then I have to have 6 male characters, so I have to start thinking of more male characters, and instead I thought of 9. So I'm like, great, what do I do now? I have 9 male characters and 6 female characters. I started thinking maybe I should add more female characters, and you know, I realized, of course, that I mean, I was thinking at this time, this is my list. It can be as long or as short as I like it, but there's this Sheldon Cooper voice in my head that kind of goes, you can't just make a top 13 or something like that. It doesn't make sense. It defeats the entire purpose of a top 10 list. You don't have any standards. You need to discipline yourself. My goodness. So I narrowed it down to, I finally got to like 10 of each. I got 10 female characters and 10 male characters, and there's still ones that are cool that I didn't get around to choosing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 5 of the female characters, sort of like my runner-ups, I guess you could say. And then I'm going to do 5 male characters that were like my runner-ups, and then do the top 5 female characters and the top 5 male characters. Overkill, I know. But, you know, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me to disinclude people just because of a numerical limitation, like only 5, only 10. You know, a 20 is good. 20 is good, wouldn't you say? I think so. So let me start with 1998. Gloria Sullivan, played by Kim Dickens in Zero Effect. If you haven't seen Zero Effect, it's about a detective for hire played by Bill Pullman, who's very Sherlock Holmes-like and he's sort of antisocial personality, but he's got an incredibly sharp mind and is very perceptive, and his Watson, if you will, is played by Ben Stiller. And he's been hired by wealthy businessmen to solve the problem of businessmen being blackmailed. So he is, let me just see how much battery power I have here. Oh, that is good. I think we're good for now, because this is going to be kind of long. I could just give you a bunch of names, but I want to give some detail about each of these. So the blackmailer, he starts his investigation. He finds out this blackmailer is this woman, Gloria Sullivan, who's an EMT, but she's claiming to have evidence that the businessman committed a crime, and that she's demanding payment of a lot of money. But he is sort of taken aback by the fact that she doesn't act like a criminal. She's very much at ease with herself. She isn't fidgety. She doesn't look like someone who's keeping a secret. She seems fine and dandy, and he's telling this to Ben Stiller. She's like, she has there's nothing odd or strange about her. She's calm, she's direct, honest, open, you know, and actually quite charming. And Ben Stiller's like, she's charming? What are you talking about? So, of course, Daryl Zero, the Bill Pullman character, starts to develop a little bit of a crush on her. It's a good character, you know, and I've always really liked the movie Zero Effect. It's a pretty sort of low-key film, but I always really liked it, so I had to include her in this. So let's see, let's jump down here to Vanessa Lutz. Yes, I started off going, okay, which Reese character I'm going to use. For those of you who know me, know I'm a big fan of Reese Witherspoon, have been for like, I don't know, since like over 20 years, I think, somewhere around there. And I'm thinking, well, a lot of people would probably pick Elle Woods or Tracy Flick or maybe even, you know, June Carter. I'm staying away from real life people. But Vanessa Lutz is a character she played in a movie called Freeway, which came out in 1996. She's sort of a trailer trash girl. She's illiterate, or at least she says she's illiterate. There's one point where she walks into a restaurant and reads a menu, so I'm thinking, oh, is she faking illiteracy? That's weird. But she has this encounter with a child therapist played by Kiefer Sutherland, who turns out to be a serial killer and tries to attack her, but she gets the upper hand on him and shoots him a couple of times and leaves him for dead. But then she's arrested for attempted murder, you know, and so when she appears in court, he's wheeled in a wheelchair and his face is all messed up. And since she knows that he's a bad guy and a serial killer, she just lays into him. She just like rips him a new one, verbally speaking, you know, and insults him and everything like that. Doesn't care who's listening, doesn't care if the attorneys or the judge is listening like that. She just rants against him, and it's hilarious. I laughed so hard during that scene. So she's just like a real troublemaker, you know. She'll mess you up bad, and I really like seeing Reese play that character. It was pretty awesome. Annie Porter is the character played by Sandra Bullock in Speed. Then there wasn't a lot to this character on paper, basically. She doesn't really have much of a history or anything like that. But then again, none of the characters really do. They're all very focused on the situation at hand. And since there wasn't a whole lot for Sandra Bullock to work with, she basically just played herself, and we're all the better for it because her sunny personality and good humor, it really just shines through in that character. There's an example of the actress really making the character. I always really liked her in that movie quite a lot. It wasn't the first movie I saw her in. Of course, I saw her in Demolition Man first, but yeah, she just got that very sort of bright personality that's awesome. So I guess that's not so much the writer, but of course Joss Whedon did do a script pass on that movie, so that's probably one of the reasons why it's so funny. Mary Rowengartner. Mary Rowengartner is the mother of the main character in a 1993 baseball film called Rookie of the Year. A 13-year-old kid is in an accident, he hurts his shoulder, but when he heals up, he's got a super incredible fastball, which is amazing. So as sort of a publicity stunt, the Chicago Cubs hire him to pitch for them, and it's crazy. So the kid's mother is played by, oh shoot, I forgot to look up the name of this actress. I'm sorry about that, that's my bad. I could check IMDb, but that would just take too long. But Mary Rowengartner is like one of the coolest movie moms ever. Really, really, really awesome movie mom. So I had to give her a mention. And then there's Sharon. Sharon has no last name that I know of. She's played by Mimi Rogers in a 1991 film called The Rapture. And she's a single woman who basically works on a 411 call center. But her life's pretty empty, and then she discovers God, and she joins a bunch of people that are waiting for Judgment Day to come. The rapture, as it were. And along the way, she marries Dave Duchovny, and they have a daughter, and then some pretty serious stuff starts to happen that makes her question everything. Pretty crazy movie, pretty severe. And the character, she just goes through a lot. And it's hard sometimes to relate to her, but there are times when it's just her sort of anger at the world and at the universe and her life and everything like that is really, really strong. And I've always just been really blown away by the movie. So that's one right there. Okay, so that's 5 right there. So let's try the men, a few of the males here. And I had some runners up in this category, such as the Tin Man and Hans Gruber and Spock and Ash from Evil Dead 2. But here are some of the guys that I went with. Seth Brundle. Seth Brundle is played by Jeff Goldblum in the David Cronenberg film The Fly. He is a scientist. He's working on a teleportation device, the first of its kind. He accidentally, he tested on himself, thinking that it would be fine because the baboon that he tested on turned out fine. But a fly, a housefly, got caught in the machine, and so the computer, the system, mixed their DNA. And now when he came out, he looks human, but he's slowly turning into a part fly creature because the fly DNA is starting to assert itself. And so he's in deep trouble. He is slowly degenerating into something that isn't human, and he doesn't know how to get out of the situation. Really like Jeff Goldblum in a lot of his roles, and this is probably my favorite role of his. I saw it when I was pretty young, so it was, you know, quite a shocking film at the time. But the core is the relationship between him and the science journalist played by Gina Davis, he's asked to sort of chronicle the whole thing. He goes through a lot. He goes, you know, and the makeup's really, really heavy at times, and then, you know, just things get really crazy. Really, really like this movie a lot, so I had to give him a mention. Now, I actually had 10 worked out, and then as I was like about to sit down and make the video, I realized, oh my goodness, I forgot one of the most important characters, one of the most awesome characters ever. I completely left him off the list, so I had to knock Tom Regan from Miller's Crossing off and stick in Barry Champlain. Barry Champlain is a radio talk show host played by Eric Bogosian in the Oliver Stone film Talk Radio, which came out in 1988. This guy has a personality like you wouldn't believe, and I actually recorded on a cassette all of the talk show segments from the movie, and I would listen to just listen to the dialogue. The guy is amazing. I've never seen him the actor play anything quite like this. Certainly not, didn't give as good a performance, but it's like one of those really, really big performances like Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York, or one of the big Robert De Niro performances, or Pacino. I mean, the guy is just full force, and he's just amazing. It's an amazing film. It's like basically 2 shows and like the weekend in between, you know, and one of the biggest weekends of his life professionally. And he's just dealing with angry callers and stupid callers, and he just lays into them one after the other. It's an incredible performance, and what an amazing character. Talk radio is definitely something that if you're fond of like that kind of an acting showcase, you definitely will want to take a look at that one. How about another big acting showcase in a Stanley Kubrick film? Alex DeLarge is the main character of A Clockwork Orange, and he was, of course, played by Malcolm McDowell. Man, I couldn't get enough of this movie when I saw it when I was 16 years old, man. The narration, the whole style of the movie, everything like that. And Alex, of course, is the center of it. He's a really sort of shady guy. He's kind of a psycho, actually. He roughs people up, he rapes women, you know, he steals cars and money and breaks into houses with his gang, and then he's arrested and he's given what they call the Ludovico treatment, which if he has the impulse to do anything bad, he immediately gets sick and has suicidal thoughts and feelings, and so he's in a lot of trouble then. So yeah, there's like a distinct 3-act structure to that movie in terms of his life beforehand, and then his incarceration and rehabilitation in his life after that, which is crazy. Malcolm McDowell's, you know, fantastic actor, and when he was in, you know, some of these, I'm planning on actually watching a 1973 film that he was in called A Lucky Man from my 1973 series, and so, you know, that'll be fun to see him. Another film of his from back in the day. Also, there's a movie he was in called If around the same time that I've read a lot about, but I don't think I've seen. I might have seen it, but I don't remember it if I have. So, but yeah, Alex is just such a crazy character. Of course, that's based on a novel, but yeah, he's really something else. Another very, very evil person who's known primarily as Palpatine. He's also known as the Emperor in certain films. He, of course, is played by Ian McDiarmid. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Ian McDiarmid. An English actor who played him in Return of the Jedi, and, of course, the 3 Star Wars prequels. And Palpatine, of course, being the Voldemort to Luke Skywalker's Harry Potter, in a certain sense. Seriously, think about it. Darth Vader is Snape, because he's a bad guy, but then he turns out to be good. And then Luke's 2 best friends are Hermione and Ron, aka Leia and Han Solo. Ron Han. How about that, huh? Anyway, Palpatine was, of course, the first time I saw him was Return of the Jedi when it came out, and I was like 10 at the time. And he was the scariest, creepiest, most evil thing ever, man.
I'm looking forward to completing your training. In time, you will call me master.
You know, and he shoots lightning bolts out of his fingertips. He doesn't even pick up a lightsaber in that movie, man. All he just does is talk in a very sinister way, you know, tells Vader what to do and then terrorizes Luke. Man, the guy is so incredibly sinister. And there's a lot of moments in the prequels that I really was fond of, largely because of that character. Especially in The Phantom Menace, the first one. I really like his performance in The Phantom Menace, just because if he's evil, it's a very, very subtle, understated evil. You just get little hints of it here and there. Of course, those of us who have seen the original trilogy first knew where the character was going, but, you know, when he seems to be this very genial, you know, nice guy, but occasionally he'll say something like, I will be Chancellor, you know, with that certainty that, you know, it's just like, oh, it's trouble. His strategy, I just love his strategy, is the way they detailed it there. Step number 1, make an alliance with the Trade Federation and arrange for them to blockade your home world so you can convince your queen to vote the current Chancellor out of office because you tell her that she's corrupt, and then you get yourself elected by spreading bribes everywhere. Step 2, get your apprentice, Count Dooku, to start the separatist movement and wage war against the Republic so that you can convince the Senate to give you more power and create clone troopers that obey your every word and gesture. And then 3, blame the rebellion on the Jedi, wipe them out with the clone troopers, and say that you've declared yourself Emperor. Bingo, you're the ruler of the entire galaxy. It's amazing, really, really cool. So last guy in the first 5 males, RoboCop. RoboCop, aka the Detroit police officer formerly known as Alex Murphy, is played by Peter Weller in the film RoboCop that came out in 1987, directed by Paul Verhoeven. Again, one of these tragic science fiction movies like The Fly, where things go very, very wrong for the main character and they find themselves in this crazy situation. In this case, he was shot and killed, but then wakes up to find himself rebuilt into, you know, a half-machine thing, which they call RoboCop. So it's kind of a modern-day Frankenstein story. There's actually some cool stuff in the second movie, but it doesn't last very long. He's confronted by some people who tell him that he's not a guy, he's not a human being, and that he needs to stop hanging around and checking out his wife and kid because, you know, he doesn't have them anymore because technically he's supposed to be dead. So they make him tell the woman who Murphy was married to originally that oh, this isn't actually, you know, this looks like your husband, but they designed it basically as tribute to him or something like that. He's a fallen cop. Yeah, but it's a sad story. It's a sad situation. Plus, there's a lot of action in it, and he has some good lines. And of course, the very best line in the whole movie being the one at the end where, you know, the guy asks him after he's killed the last bad guy, "Nice shooting, son. What's your name?" And he says, instead of RoboCop, he says Murphy, because he managed to figure out exactly who he was by his partner. I've liked Peter Weller in a lot of movies. Buckaroo Banzai, of course, and he had a nice little bit in 24. But yeah, that's a really, really interesting character. I really like that sort of tragic circumstance mixed in with action. So yeah, those are 5 male characters. Now let's go back to my 5 favorite female characters. Where shall I start here? How about Jenny? Jenny has no last name to speak of until, of course, she marries the main character in the 1994 film Forrest Gump, and she's played by Robin Wright, of course. Jenny is an interesting character because you could look at her as sort of a way that the storyteller is demonizing the counterculture. On the one hand, you've got Forrest Gump, who's a good guy, and he believes in God, and he loves his mom, and he does what he's told, and he ends up being a millionaire and having a great life and all kinds of adventure. Whereas Jenny, she kind of goes off on her own. She goes and experiences the heavy movement and gets, I don't know, has lots of trouble with bad boyfriends and drugs and what have you, and you know, has thoughts of suicide, and eventually contracts AIDS. So she doesn't have as good a life. But she is also a sex abuse victim. She was molested by her father when she was a little girl, and so that you know, didn't help things. And the character of Forrest is, you know, of course, a simple-minded guy, so he just sort of takes things as they are and doesn't complain a lot, and or at all really. Whereas Jenny is just someone who is very uncertain about a lot of stuff, whereas Forrest is certain about the kind of person that he is and the kind of life he ought to lead. She is uncertain, and so that takes her a lot of places that she doesn't necessarily want to go. I'm not the biggest fan of Robin Wright, but I thought the character is really interesting, and I was very sad about what happened to her in the end. Yeah, plus Forrest Gump is just, you know, a fantastic, fantastic movie. How about Danielle Bowden, daughter of Sam and Lee Bowden, in the 1991 Martin Scorsese film Cape Fear. Here's another example of an actress really elevating the character with her performance quite a lot. This character could have been pretty annoying, but you know, it's just amazing what she did. And she was actually nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Juliette Lewis, of course, nominated for Best Supporting Actress, opposite Robert De Niro, who was nominated for Best Actor. And while I thought there isn't a chance in hell that Robert De Niro is going to win an Oscar for playing Max Cady, the ex-convict who is terrorizing the lawyer who he blames for his incarceration and his family. I was really kind of hoping that Juliette Lewis would win the Oscar that year, but of course she didn't. The signature scene, of course, is the one where Max corners Danny at her school and talks with her privately and convinces her that, hey, you know, he's not a bad guy, you know, and that he really just wants the best for her, and that he doesn't hate her father. He just, you know, wants her, just wants him to be a good person and what have you, you know, and really kind of works on her psychologically. That's the real big scene in that movie between the two of them, but it's not just in that scene that she's good. She's good in practically every scene. She's, you know, I think she was 19 when she made the film, and she was playing a 15-year-old, and she's very convincingly teenaged. You know, her just her behavior and mannerisms. I just like the way she, you know, she's just a good speaker. There's a lot of movies that I haven't liked Juliette Lewis in, but that's definitely not one of them. So yeah, really good character and a great performance. Marion Ravenwood. Marion Ravenwood is played by Karen Allen in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The first Indiana Jones movie that Steven Spielberg made. The first Indiana Jones movie that anybody made, actually. Marion is a hard-drinking, tough gal who's running a bar in Nepal and used to have an affair. She had an affair with Indy when she was pretty young, and I think she was about to get married or something like that. They allude to that in the dialogue. She's like, I was a child, I was in love, it was wrong and you knew it. And Indy's like, you knew what you were doing. And she's like, now I do. This is my place. Get out. And believe me, the best punch that Indiana Jones takes in that whole movie is the one that she gives him. And she fights, you know, I mean, she's, you know, she doesn't have the skills that he has, but yeah, she shoots, she hits people, you know, she gives as good as she gets. She's awesome, you know, she's one of the most awesome action heroines. I was thinking about, you know, maybe the Bride in Kill Bill, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't think she has enough, as much personality as Marion. You know, the whole time, you know, she's got so many good moods to play throughout the whole thing, not just giving Indy a hard time about whatever. She's just great. She's just a great character, fun, fantastic movie, and a really awesome actress to play her. Celine also doesn't appear to have a last name that I know of. She's played by Julie Delpy in Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, not to be confused with the Celine played by Kate Beckinsale, who's a vampire and fires machine pistols and wears black leather. Celine is a French girl who meets an American named Jesse, played by Ethan Hawke in Before Sunrise. And they meet on a train, basically traveling through Europe, and he wants to get off in Vienna and spend the night there before his plane the next day. So he invites her to come along with him as, you know, they have struck up a conversation on the train. And they just hang out all night long talking about life, talking about culture, talking about their relationships and what have you, and they really make a really strong connection. And so they agree to meet 6 months later in that same exact location because he's about to, you know, he needs to catch his plane. 9 years later, you have Before Sunset, in which the characters meet again, this time in Paris, and you catch up and find out what's been going on with them and what's been happening in their lives, and it's just great talk. There's a lot of really good conversation. Some people find the Jesse character annoying, like my brother, for example, but that I can set that aside, basically, if he's maybe a little bit pretentious or what have you. by just how rich their relationship is, and just all the things they have to say to each other is so amazing. And they're going to have another movie coming out very soon called Before Midnight with the same two characters another 9 years later. First one came out in '95, the second one in 2004, and the third one is this year. So it's like the mega trilogy of like walking around and chatting with someone you're really crazy about movies. But yeah, really, really fantastic movies, both of them. And I am afraid that the new one is not going to be as good as the others, but hey, you know, anything could happen. So I'm hopeful. So yeah, fantastic. And the last female character that I wanted to mention is Veronica Quaife, played by Gina Davis in The Fly. She is the very important second half of that relationship between Seth Brundle, the scientist, and Veronica, the journalist. And the great thing about her is that she's not the typical character in a movie like this. When I talk about my favorite subgenre, the tragic sci-fi romance, most of the time it's the man that's really sort of going through a lot of crazy stuff, and the woman's just sort of along for the ride. But in this case, and that's true in this case, but Veronica has her own life. It's not like she's tied severely in with Seth. She has a career. She has this former boyfriend and her boss that she's dealing with. But there are weeks apparently that go by in the film in which they don't talk to each other, and then she'll drop in to see how he's doing and see how far he's degenerated and how sort of crazy things have gotten with him as far as his transformation goes. And she has to make some pretty hard choices in the end, and in the middle, really. You know, it's a really emotional movie, and it's been one of my favorites for a long time. I saw it when I was like 14. And it's just, you know, probably one of the first movies I saw in which I really got to see a really adult relationship, one that didn't involve any kind of kids or action, adventure, or anything like that. It's just a relationship, obviously in some very extreme science fiction horror circumstances. But yeah, and Gina Davis is an actress I've liked in a lot of different stuff, and you know, this is like the crown jewel in her resume, I think. So that's the 10 women down, and let's go down and talk about the last 5 male characters. And I'm going to take these in chronological order, actually, in the order that I saw them, because it's important. All these characters are really important to me personally. First of all, Luke Skywalker, again back with Star Wars. Of course, the first Star Wars movie came out when I was 4. And I don't know if I saw it that young, but I saw it pretty young, and Star Wars was just like everything to me. You know, I was really big on a lot of the other big, you know, stuff that was coming out then, like Star Trek and Ghostbusters and what have you. But Star Wars was just this whole incredible universe, and at the center of it was this character that I could really identify with. A lot of people go, oh, Han Solo, Harrison Ford again. You know, he's so cool, he gets all these great lines, you know, his best friend is Chewbacca, he drives the Millennium Falcon, he shot first, you know, all that great stuff, you know, but Han's just like constantly rebelling against everything and living outside, whereas Luke's basically just a good kid, kind of whiny, you know, kind of dissatisfied with his life, but a good-hearted kid who finds himself thrust into an adventure, and he has to like take on this scary challenge of learning the Force and becoming a Jedi and facing down all kinds of crazy stuff that he wasn't even aware of. He just thought, oh, out in space there's like adventure somewhere, and to be able to fly in a ship and fight against the Empire would be great. And then he, you know, realizes what his role is and everything is, and it's just like, wow, he's got to deal with his father who's turned evil, and he's got to deal with the temptation of wanting to get revenge on his friends being hurt or whatever, and the Emperor basically is teasing him, what have you, and he's got to, you know, figure out how to operate a lightsaber effectively as well. And by the time we get to Return of the Jedi, he's a very skilled with the Force, but he still has a lot of sort of self-doubt, I guess you could say. He's not like any of the Jedi in the prequels where he's just like very, very sure of his power. He's still kind of unsure because he's only really had one teacher, and that's Yoda. The stuff on Dagobah in Empire Strikes Back with Yoda is just like some really, really gripping stuff, because Yoda really is kind of a very stern teacher, and he kind of scared me a little bit, you know, because I was afraid that Luke would displease him somehow and incur his wrath. But Yoda, of course, wasn't a wrathful character. Excuse me, I'm talking a long time. So, like I said, Luke is somebody I really identified with quite a lot, more than Han, obviously. And following Luke is Superman. Superman, played by Christopher Reeve in Superman 1 and 2. And one thing that I really like in watching the Superman movies now is seeing the relationship between him and Lois Lane develop over the course of 2 movies. They're 2 separate films, 2 separate stories and adventures, but you see there's this progression of their relationship. And again, Superman is one of those characters like Luke. He's just a good-hearted guy, wants to do the right thing, believes in justice, believes in being generous and being selfless. And but the key thing with Superman is just what he can do, his abilities. I would like nothing more. Ever since I was a little kid, nothing more to be able to just fly all over the place like Superman, not have to worry about, any kind of damage to myself, being impervious and just like leaping through the air and landing anywhere. Just being able to fly all over the place is just the most exhilarating thing that I can think of. And, so it's great to see him. There's another Superman movie, of course, coming out. And I just actually finished reading this book right here. Let me take it out of the plastic for you so you can see it better. But the character of Superman being an alien, he's sort of like, I sometimes wonder whether or not he has the same kind of feelings as human beings does, whether or not he feels shame or jealousy or whatever. This is called Red Sun, and it's basically a book about what would have happened if Superman had landed in Russia when he came here from Krypton versus if he came here from Earth. This is a really exciting book because it's basically a battle of the minds between himself and Lex Luthor. Superman basically becomes like the president of Russia, and all kinds of countries around the world fall under communist rule because, he's Superman and he can, he's a very smart guy too. But Lex Luthor eventually becomes president of the United States and causes some trouble for him. So the ending to this book is really, really crazy. I'm looking forward to seeing the new film. I'm not the biggest Zack Snyder fan, but yeah, it's Superman. I gotta check it out. Just like with the Star Wars prequels. I figured they couldn't be great, and they were so much worse than I wanted and than I was expecting them to be, but still it was Star Wars. I couldn't help but want to see it, and so the same is true with Superman. He's just an exhilarating character just to sort of dream about, I guess you could say. Anyway, in 1992, when I was 9, I saw a film called E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The main character of that was Elliot, played by Henry Thomas. And Elliot has a teenage brother and a younger sister, Gertie, played by Drew Barrymore, and his mom is divorced. And of course, the alien, again with the aliens, lands in his backyard more or less, and so he takes care of it over the course of several weeks. Teaches a little bit about Earth culture. It learns to speak. They become friends. And seeing as how Elliot was pretty much my age when I saw this movie, I just couldn't help but identify with this character. Like, how amazing would it be to have this incredible thing, meet you and become friends and have this big adventure where you're trying to protect it and keep it hidden, keep it secret, and then have to ward off government agents and what have you. Yeah, Elliot's something. And Henry Thomas is a good actor, and I really liked him in the movie, but just the situation, more or less, is what really sold me on it. Speaking of characters I identify with, all these characters I kind of identify one way or another. I mentioned Back to the Future earlier. That was Claire's favorite character, Marty, played by Michael J. Fox. And Marty is a very charismatic guy, he plays guitar, he's good on a skateboard, he's got a pretty girlfriend, lots of people like him. Not is the case so much with George McFly. George McFly, of course, is his father. And when he travels back to 1955 and meets his father when George was his own age, he finds out, what his life was really like back then. Now, of course, I had a lot easier time identifying with George because I was sort of the meek type, not great with girls, not terribly good looking, certainly not an athlete or a rock star. And George manages, with Marty's help, to find the strength in him and the means of becoming the best version of himself. So you have the original version of George before Marty travels back in time, he was sort of a pushover. And then when he comes back to the future, of course, back to his present in 1985, his father's completely changed. He's a new man. He's just someone you can look up to. He's a writer. He's just published a novel, and he's got the school bully waxing his car in the driveway. I'm just like, go, George! Not to mention the fact that Lorraine, played by Leah Thompson, falls in love with him not out of pity, but out of admiration, which is the best possible change that could have happened in his life. What a great guy, George McFly. Just an awesome, awesome dude. So glad to see him punch Biff out and just get the girl in the end. That was fantastic. You know, that's you know, one movie where the main character doesn't get the girl in the end, but still, it's an incredible ending. Finally, the last character I'd like to talk about of a film that came out in 1995. The character, we never know what his real name is. He calls himself John Doe. He's played by Kevin Spacey, and that's in the David Fincher film Seven. And this is just one of the scariest people I've ever encountered in any film. The guy, they're tracking him throughout the whole movie, and you don't see him, you don't even know who he is, you know, what he looks like or anything like that until like the final quarter of the movie in which he just shows up and turns himself in. He's already killed 5 people as sort of, and as what Morgan Freeman, the detective, is determined, he's like using the 7 deadly sins as teaching tools. I don't know who it is he's trying to teach exactly, because the only one that sees the details of his crimes are police officers investigating the case. Presumably the guy thinks that the case will be written about in books and everything like that, and people will sort of get the message across. But his message basically is, the world is too complacent, and there's deadly sins everywhere, and people just accept it, and I'm going to change people's minds about that. So he decides to kill an overweight man by forcing him to eat himself to death, and he kills a lawyer by forcing him to cut off a pound of his own flesh. That's greed, and he continues on with the sins until he gets to the prostitute, and you don't want to even know what he does with the prostitute. If you haven't seen the movie, I won't describe it for you. Seven is such a fantastic movie. I was so blown away by this movie. I could not take my eyes off the screen. It was just the craziest thing ever. At the end of the movie, I was just shaking and laughing at the same time, and Kevin Spacey, of course, is one of my favorite actors, and he's just so fantastic in this movie. He's had bigger parts, of course, where he gets to do more. But yeah, he's just incredible. And the character himself, so incredibly scary, so creepy. There's this moment where they encounter him as an apartment building a little ahead of schedule. He didn't expect to be caught this early, and so he makes a run for it. And I'm sitting there going, please catch him, please catch him, please catch him, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, and his last thing at the end, of course, you've seen the movie and know all about it, but his final twist in the knife is just, wow. I mean, Ozymandias is nothing on this guy. Well, Ozymandias is pretty grandiose, but still, that's the character from Watchmen, by the way. Anyway, that's all of them, I think. That's 20 characters. Wow, I went on for a long time. Hope that you enjoyed this. I enjoyed thinking about all these characters, and all the characters, of course, that I didn't include on this list. Thank you very much for watching, Claire. Look forward to seeing more of your stuff. Take it easy, and I have to go catch my breath and eat something now. Bye.